Namaste. So it's Pentecost. And I only have readings from the Bible today because there really is no parallel in any other tradition. I mean, it would be a huge stretch, and I didn't want to do a huge stretch. And I also wanted to kind of look at this in a different way. Traditionally, Pentecost is interpreted to mean that essentially God is accessible to anyone. And it was this time of transition for the earliest Christians, most of whom were Jews, to start to expand their view that they had held and had been taught. I mean, they didn't decide all by themselves, that God only loved or most loved the Jewish people. And the experience of all of those names of places that most of us don't know where they are, people from all those places, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and a Cretan, the occasional Cretan. Most of us read that list and we're like, well, where in the heck were those places? Because those places aren't called now what they were called then anymore. And so I took it out because I didn't think it was very helpful. But imagine if instead you plugged in 12 large cities at random from around the world. You know, Moscow, Beijing,
Seoul.
Where?
Seoul.
Seoul, somewhere in South America.
And then occasional Cartagena.
Yeah, and Cartagena. Which, by the way, is how they knew they were Galileans. Because Galileans had a little special accent, you know. Kind of like when you hear people around here go, ya der dem de here ya. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then of course people from Moscow and Seoul and Beijing wouldn't have that dem der accent. So, and I think it's true, there's great value in looking at it that way, that it was for those people, those earliest Jewish Christians, this shift in consciousness. But it's also, I think, sort of not necessarily a microcosm, but a little analogous story about human nature and how it resists spirituality. Because self-interest resists spirituality. And we all want to know that we're okay. And the easiest way to know that I'm okay is to find someone decidedly different from me and decide that they're not. And because then I can say, well, I'm okay because I'm like this, and they're not okay because they're like that. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
What did you say?
Donald Trump. Well, xenophobia is all about that. The fear of the outsider is exactly that. And whether it comes out really blatantly or whether it's done more subtly, like a couple of years ago, right around it must have been 2016, maybe early 2017, after the election and the inauguration, I was listening to KLH, and they were playing an audio clip of Sting saying things that were quite true, actually, about the American political system, but they were not very complimentary. And the DJ said, we don't need those outsiders telling us how to run our country. And I would hope if this guy's ass ever catches fire, and say a European happens to be standing there who says, hey, your ass is on fire, you better find some water, that he goes to find the water and doesn't just say, listen, don't tell me about my ass. It's my ass, I'll worry about my ass. And the other ways that works is that I think really spirituality and the spirit, however you want to understand it, from whatever tradition you want to understand it, pushes us constantly to expand. It's kind of like, remember the old megaphones before the electric ones that, like almost like a funnel, but the Spirit wants to move us from the mouthpiece of the megaphone to the opening, broaden us. And human nature wants to move us from the opening back to the mouthpiece and say, oh, wait a minute. I mean, we're okay because we call on the name of Jesus to be saved, but, or God's name is God, G-O-D, not Allah. And so, I think as a general rule we can say, anytime we find ourselves trying to shut down, trying to narrow, trying to maybe not any time on this, maybe 90% of the time, when we try to move to a place where we feel safer, we stop growing. Now, I'm not saying, you ought to stick a lot of cash in the collar of your shirt and go walking downtown at 3 in the morning. That's a bad idea, okay? And if you don't feel safe because of that, you're spot on. That's, that's, there are times and situations which aren't safe. But if we feel this gnawing discomfort because we're being asked to do something that we think isn't what people like us do, by and large, we're resisting the spiritual call to open ourselves more. And John's Gospel does that a lot. Remember the part in John's Gospel? We had it just a few weeks ago. I no longer call you disciples, but friends. Now I speak to you clearly and not in parables, because you're friends and you understand what I'm telling you. I have much more to say to you, but you can't handle it now. Well, which one is it? But that's that fight. You can take what I have to tell you now. But John starts thinking about that and goes, oh, maybe it's too much. I mean, I could be friends with a guy that looked like me and lived in my neighborhood. But what are you going to do when you're asked to be friends with somebody who doesn't look like you and doesn't live in your neighborhood? That is the growth point. And I think spirituality always calls us to grow. It lets us rest sometimes too. But it always calls us to grow and never calls us to shrink. And we get this idea, pop religion has this idea, evangelicalism especially, that I call happy, happy, joy, joy. You're supposed to always be happy, happy, joy, joy. Just filled with peace and joy and love because Jesus loves you. Really? So then, when somebody close to you gets a diagnosis, does that mean that Jesus stops loving you? Or does that mean that you have to go over to them and tell them, well, obviously you didn't call on the name of the Lord? That's that fighting the expansion. That's that very natural human tendency to run away from moments of growth and run away from challenging moments because they're uncomfortable. But do you know what happens to somebody who lays in bed and never gets out? Yeah, they do that. Yeah, and sooner or later they can't get out because they haven't stretched themselves. They haven't gone to a place where there's some discomfort. And it seems like a good idea to just relax, but if that's all we do, if all we do is reside in comfortable places, then sooner or later that's the only place we can live. It's like a governor. You know what a governor is on a truck? It's they probably have electronic ones now, but they used to be mechanical stops that would, sometimes even under the accelerator, that would keep it from going beyond a certain speed limit. Schneider trucks used to all have a governor that stopped them at 55. So no matter what you did, they couldn't go 60. And even if you got out in the country where the speed limit was higher, too damn bad. That's what human nature is, kind of like a governor on our truck. You know, don't go faster. Don't stretch it. That could be dangerous. And maybe it works on trucks, but.
So if anybody wants to answer, I kind of like them, but how are any of you going beyond your own boundaries and stretching yourself?
Well, yesterday I hung out with friends that I never hung out with before, and I don't do well in their social gatherings, and it's usually very awkward, very tense, and I usually don't talk. I'm very, put back. And yesterday it was just, I pushed myself to do it and to get out of my comfort zone and go somewhere where I've never been before and accept what they're doing and go along with it. It's a little different, but I think for me that was a big step in growing.
And how does that feel today, looking back at it? How do you feel about it today?
Would you do it again?
Yes, but under different circumstances. Because the people who I had met yesterday, I did not particularly enjoy the one person that was just all over the place and kept interrupting and kept just, it was very tense and very awkward, because when I would say something, she would talk to the other friend like what I'm saying didn't even.
Do you get it now?
Yeah, I do. I know. And see, that's another thing I'm working on, is my own impulse control. When I'm at home, I have a lot of impulse control, and I interrupt, and and I see it with other people, and I am pushing myself to kind of step back and really listen before I talk. And it's hard because I do deal with ADHD, and that's constantly a struggle for me to step back and not just blurt out and be impulsive. So it was interesting. I have to keep pushing myself. I know, but it's a good reason to grow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's different, but
Hey, as long as the next day you're not saying that was the worst decision of my entire life to go there, then it was a good thing.
It wasn't the worst decision, but I was ready to go by like 8:30 and ended up staying till like 9:30, almost 10 o'clock, and I was just.
Your inner introvert was screaming.
Yes. I even kept making little points like, okay, it's getting pretty late, it's and they're my ride, so I have to wait for them because I can't take a bus home. Like, okay, I'm kind of ready to go. Anybody else ready to go? I want to go home. I'm done.
Let's stop here so find a way to make this.
And there's nothing like this that relates to other religions or spiritual traditions.
Well, not to Pentecost so much. I mean, not the.
But the thing that is available to all.
Yeah, it's in the most Eastern traditions are not evangelical by their nature. They don't convert people, try and promote, and so, in fact, they will overtly recommend you stay where you are. And not that you don't necessarily can't, or I should say, not that you can't learn from them, but they're not going to try and sign you up for their team like the cartoon on the back of the bulletin. It's like evangelism mixed with a cell phone salesman. And so that's not there, and Judaism traditionally is an introverted tradition, which says, no, it's just us. And Islam is, I don't think Islam is a big evangelical tradition, but I could be wrong. But I don't think so. Not like this whole idea from this, everybody understood everybody else, right? That's the whole deal. And then we said, go convert everybody else. We put that on Jesus' lips, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And in India, that's illegal.
Really?
Yeah. No, converting people.
Oh, to what religion?
So speak, yeah, that didn't, holy cow. But I don't think that's such a bad thing, the conversion. Forced conversion or coerced conversion is illegal. We're down stomping around Africa, not us, thank God, but our John Hagee friends are down stomping around Africa converting Muslim folks to Christianity as a hard sell, and the result is that they're alienated from their family and often their lives are at risk. Leave them be.
Yeah. That's how I feel.
Yeah, if you want to, give them a sandwich, but then don't come with the pitch after the sandwich. Like Salvation Army, gee, are you hungry? Well, you got to come in here and hear a story first. No, give them the damn sandwich. Because if you really believe that there's only one God, if you're really a monotheist, then we're all talking about the same God, even though we use different language and imagery. And if we let go, do you know that Joel, by the way, who's quoted in that first reading, does not appear in the lectionary? Because he's the most depressing little Old Testament book. I mean, it's great, your sons and daughter will prophesy, your young will see visions, but then by the time he gets to blood and fire and a cloud of smoke, everybody's kind of going, oh, geez.
Yeah.
There's that guy that showed up at the party, right? But that evangelical thing where I've got to convert you, or you're going to go to hell.
Yeah, I agree with that thought, but I also see the people who think that way, do live it that way. And
Oh, yeah.
They really do think they're doing other people things.
Oh, yeah. And if...
for that you can't.
I'm not saying that they're not entitled to believe whatever they want, but I am saying, by their fruit you will know them. And if you're doing that and you look around and start to say, oh, where's old, I haven't seen in a few weeks, and somebody says, well, they killed for converting to Christianity, then you have a responsibility, I think, to go,
Praise
Oh.
the Lord, he was a martyr.
that's right,
That's
straight
it. That's
straight
what
to
they
heaven.
say.
Straight to heaven.
That's
Well,
what they will say. They will die a martyr, praising God.
yeah. But did
They still
you,
think that's good.
I know, but did you, I would think if you would come along and objectively present what's going on, like, okay, here's the Christian story, and the likelihood is that if you relate to this more than you relate to your present tradition, you and your family will be in mortal danger.
Yep, what?
In mortal danger.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, then if they made the decision, well, then they made an informed choice. But that's not what happens. And
So I guess I fear, as much as I fear being judged, I fear judging others.
I think an important thing is, like you said, everybody has a right to their beliefs.
yeah,
Nobody has a right to cram them down somebody else's throat, even if they're called it. They can try, they can spread the message. There's a difference between spreading the message and beating somebody with it. Forcing them again, like pressuring them, and that's what happens in these places. It isn't just that they are spreading the message. It's like what happened when, colonizers came here. And it's what they did to the Native Americans. They were like, your religion is wrong, you need to be Christian, you need to be this, that, the other. It's the same concept. It's these people that feel it's their duty to, I'm pretty sure like the message, all it's spread the word. Share my message. It doesn't say anything about make everybody,
well, and he never, unless you get into John, where it's much more theologically processed, he never ever says, I'm God. He says, follow my teachings. He says, follow God. But since I mentioned my favorite, one of my top 10 least favorite evangelicals, Hagee, who believes that we need to support Israel because it'll hasten the second coming of Christ. And so essentially what he's saying is we need to ensure that there will be a cataclysmic war in the Middle East because that'll make Jesus come again. Now his belief is impacting other people in a rather negative way. And he's free to hold it. He's not free to act on it.
I'm gonna throw out it seems like you were suggesting kind of reframing Pentecost, to see it as this inclusive impulse. And I
Or
agree
expansive.
With that. Yeah, expansive.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. The other thing is that I wanted to kind of, when I think about it, I want to see if there's a way to sort of reappropriate it for purposes of an interspiritual church, which
Sure.
is that, because I'm doing Pentecost services, and it seemed to me that the power of the experience was that something, just as we said with Easter, and without explaining the resurrection, somehow the people who knew Jesus and then communicated to others thereafter an enduring experience of power of the Jesus encounter. The Pentecost, to me, underscores the indwelling of God's presence in a way that can be really transformative and empowering and radical, because otherwise the circumstances for Christianity to succeed at all were pretty bleak. It's kind of bad PR to follow a rabbi from nowhere who was really a carpenter and then ended up crucified as a criminal, and make up stories about what happened to him after he died, and say, and if you believe this, guess what? You'll get to be persecuted or killed.
Next up in the Colosseum.
Yeah, and that was the norm for 300 years, and yet something took these bumbling fishermen from being bumbling fishermen and tax collectors to spreading a message that, for all the abuses that have occurred in the name of Christianity, has also brought about tremendous outreach to the poor and inclusion, and its better manifestations has been extremely positive and transformative. And more important for us, Pentecost says that same transformative presence of the divine that Christianity has articulated as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is still active and alive. And I don't want to lose sight of that in also talking about the fact that there are people.
No, I don't think it matters where I'm sorry, I pulled my back out this morning.
Oh.
But this is really interesting. So.
I have aspirin or Tylenol or Aleve. Well, I'm an older man.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I didn't.
No.
I just wanted to see
If
what
we
you
can
thought.
help.
No, you're fine.
You want to help?
No, it doesn't matter. I keep standing. That doesn't bother.
I think I agree with. I don't think. I agree.
I know
with,
you don't think.
I can't win on that one. I agree with you. And to me, what I think was ultimately transformative was the relationship that developed.
Yeah.
At Pentecost, it's like, I'm not supposed to talk to you. You're not supposed to understand me. I don't even know your language. But I think what they discovered was when they sat down together, the relationship was transformative. And the difference between Christianity and the Judaism of the time, and maybe today, is that Judaism wouldn't have allowed the conversation to take place because they would have believed it defiled them.
Well, and in fact, Peter was the one who ended up, sent to Cornelius and said, oh my God, these Gentiles have received the Holy Spirit and they haven't even been baptized. How can that work?
Where's my scissors?
You know?
I'm sorry.
Which was one of the main arguments that was used in the Episcopal Church to validate, the acceptance of gays as
Humans.
yeah, the new Cornelius that God was, looking at the benefits, the gifts, the spirituality present in their lives, and say maybe we've been seeing things all wrong. And I just think that
Which is that?
we had the track. We continually have a track in Christianity that goes out of fear back into us and them, and control and condemnation of others and othering, rather than keeping the doors wide open and opening them even wider.
And I think that's that megaphone thing
Yeah.
going on,
Yeah.
where the Spirit says open, and we say, ooh, that's pretty scary, and we narrow. Just bought a new lingerie bag for the washing machine, and this thing, it's bizarre. It's not like the other ones I have to put my delicate undergarments in. It is like round like a tube, and it zippers in the middle, so it's kind of crunched, and almost looks like a mini little accordion, like you could go like this. But that's kind of a metaphor for that. What happens, we pull it open, or like a bellows on those things that fan a fire,
Yeah.
We pull it open, and spirituality and the Spirit, and I believe God call us to pull it open, and then it's like we get a little spasm and we go, oh, that was a bad idea. But then if we really are attentive and engaged in the practice or whatever it is we do, it calls us to open it back up again. And I think that's what happened. Maybe all people really are God's children. Oh, but I don't know what to do when I'm around those people.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's not about you.
Vatican II, open wide the doors, and then Benedict, and close them down.
Yeah.
You
It's
know what, my mother always taught me, don't ever answer the door for Jehovah's Witness. So I saw this wonderful family walking down the street yesterday, and I'm like, wow, I was really they're going to the Jehovah's Witness church. And I'm like, that thought came from my mom. She taught me, don't even talk to them because they're a cult.
although they can be boorish. I mean, really.
I don't really know I didn't
What?
Boorish.
Well, yeah, but that's what they believe. They go in their
Right.
nice suits and they go from, that's their belief that everybody should be.
Which is weird because they're having only holds, 700 people?
100,
Oh.
Right.
no,
Right.
12
Yeah,
times
those
12
are
times
all
1,000.
Yeah.
144,000.
Oh, okay.
But
12,
that doesn't mean
12.
that everyone else would not be welcome on the renewed earth, and that's their obligation. In order to help guarantee that they will be one of the 144,000, they need to.
Yeah.
I have
They have to earn their way there.
a funny JW story. In my first congregation, one of the long-term founding members was a retired social worker. In fact, he was the director of St. Emilian's Lakeside, and then St. Emilian's Lakeside. And Al was a great guy. Al would talk to anybody. And Jehovah's Witnesses came to his door, and he invited them in. Asked them if they were hungry. It was a hot day. Made them a sandwich. Gave them something to drink. The next day, his phone rings, and it's their supervisor. And they had gone back and said that they were concerned that perhaps they had met the devil, because this guy was actually nice to them, and nobody was ever nice to him. And so,
Really?
yeah. And so that,
Wow.
I mean, there's a lot you can
What
pull
a
from.
jump.
Right?
Yeah,
That's such a jump.
yeah.
Wouldn't you rather say, well, these are some really nice people, let's invite them, over.
You don't know how people
They treated
believe.
us nicely.
Maybe if you get battered enough and somebody treats you nicely, you get really a lot of very
You're
suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you being nice to me?
But there again, that's the bellows.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I watch a show called Lucifer, and it's literally about the devil
Mhm.
and the devil coming to Earth and learning how to live on Earth and deal with Earthlings and the way of life and all that. And it's just really interesting when he, has to learn how to open himself up to new people and new things and new ideas. And his selfishness always prevails. And it's funny. He never tries and converts people to be evil or selfish or anything like that. It's just, who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And other people just kind of like, just realize, yeah, this is who he is. We just gotta like kind of leave him be, let him do him, and it works. And he sees a therapist that knows his whole back story and is kind of a friend, and it's wild how there's a show on Fox about the devil
Of all
literally.
places.
Yeah, right.
Fox,
Of
yeah.
all things.
Yeah.
Literally the devil, and then you bring in the angels and the wings, and there's an episode about God himself and how he came down to earth because of this belt that this guy was wearing, and God encompassed his body, and it was just amazing how when I watch that show I think, wow, that's really amazing, and Lucifer's not such a bad guy. The devil isn't really.
I'm sure he's charming.
Is the
I
Old
mean-
Testament the first science fiction book? I mean, if
I mean, honestly, you think the devil is this evil guy who goes around and does bad things, but he's not.
Well, he's charming. Yeah.
He is charming,
Dr.
and
Max
it's
Husband.
very charismatic, and you can get really sucked into it, but his personality doesn't force you to be evil. He doesn't force
No,
you to make
we
those
choose
choices.
that. We choose between.
We
yeah.
choose.
Yeah.
And in the last episode, which they left it on such a cliffhanger.
This was on TV?
Yes, on Fox.
Oh.
I
Go
watched it
figure.
on Hulu, but it's from the
Oh,
channel
I got
Fox.
Hulu.
And that on its own self, on its own scale, we know all about Fox News.
Well-
And how, they depict the devil as their
Yeah.
main character.
Rupert Murdoch?
And it's just, and this guy, he's really a kind character.
Uh-huh.
He's, selfish, and he has lots of issues to deal with, but
Yeah.
in the end, he says, wait a minute, it's not God's fault. We have the freedom of choice. We have free will.
Right.
We choose to do evil things. We choose to make those decisions. It's not up to God. God didn't make me lose my wings. I lost my wings. Now I've accepted myself, and my wings are back. And, he was cast down to hell, and he was sick of being in hell. And it was just, I think a lot of us kind of have to realize that for ourselves and our perception of the world, and how, sometimes people blame God for things happening, but it's really us that, we have to allow ourselves to expand and accept that it's us that make those choices. Only we can accept those around us and expand ourselves and accept the differences that everybody has and just kind of acknowledge it.
And those things are much more insidious, I think, because, okay, if you wanted to name the really bad people in history, okay, Hitler, obviously.
Yeah.
But people like that are few and far between. I mean, most of the damage that people do to other people are through little bad choices, not dramatically, not genocide. I'm not saying
Right.
genocide isn't bad, but genocide generally
Little
occurs for a
events.
period of time and then it's done. But every day, people are making bad choices that at the very least are hurtful and at the very worst are evil in their relationships with other people.
Trump is one of the biggest examples.
Yeah.
on
But even,
national television.
did you see the guy there was some clown, another clown in a restaurant being derisive toward people that were speaking Spanish?
Yes, I saw that.
Oh, jeez.
And even on his website, it says that he speaks Spanish for his clients.
Oh, my
Like,
God.
and the people were working. And he
Yeah.
called them out saying that they were on welfare. How are they on welfare? They're obviously working.
Well, where is it? Leon's, over that way, I guess. A few years ago when the old crusty owner said his employees couldn't speak Spanish at work.
Oh, my God.
It's kind of like, well, I guess you're going to have to bus some people in then because Leon's is on 27th in Oklahoma. I mean,
Right.
it's a
I'm
heavily
I'm not going
Hispanic
there
area.
anymore.
Yeah, well, he backed down after a couple days because he was going to get shut down. And I don't think he really said that with malice. He was getting complaints, and he didn't think about it, and he's an older guy. But those are hurtful, painful things that happen, much more often than dramatic, huge, high-scale,
Stalin and Hitler.
killing
Yeah.
fields in Cambodia. I mean, those are terrible, horrible things. But I bet if you set, and I wouldn't advocate it, but if you set up a scale and threw all the horrible things on one edge and all the little things we do to hurt and degrade one another on the other scale, I think that one would be much heavier.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot that we do in a society that's very, I mean, I work in it. I mean, there's drug addiction and lots of, I have a guy that got shot twice. He was just sitting on his porch. I mean, that's where I come from, and I love working in the inner city. So, but I see that as a society, the other thing that really bothers me is the human trafficking. It's like, are you kidding me? This is going on, and I don't know. Maybe I need to look at the good side, but it's like I see what as a society we're doing, and I think that we're hurting each other. Okay, and a lot of it is I think drug addiction and alcoholism. I think causes a lot of crime.
Which too are rooted in people trying to medicate their pain.
Right.
Trying to resolve their unresolved
They're born
pain.
in the cycle of addiction, and
Yeah.
it just continues.
Yeah.
So,
We haven't fixed this yet.
I've seen a lot of white privilege lately too.
Oh, yeah.
There's videos going around where they did an experiment where a white guy walked around with an AR-15 and a black guy walked around with an AR-15.
Oh.
The white guy
Yeah.
got stopped by the police and was asked, "Hey, why are you walking around with that gun?" The black guy immediately, gun out, they're ready to shoot him.
Yeah.
5 police cars are rolling
Oh,
around. They, it's just like an extreme, like, what?
yeah, it's bad. My
Sad part
daughter's dating an African American, and he's the nicest, most gentle guy in the world. And people look at him across the street. So he gets it all the time. Like, today, really? I was like shocked.
All 3 of our grandkids are biracial, and it's
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
yeah.
Well, the new princess is half and half.
I know,
I
and
think that's
it's
cool. And she's divorced, and she's in the royal family. So
Right.
that's progress.
It's amazing. He married her knowing that they can't spend eternity together because obviously she's going to hell. But isn't that the ultimate white privilege? Is the whole royals?
That royal
Mhm.
family. I mean, I'm just looking at their hats going, oh, whatever.
There's something about middle-aged, especially white women, who get really attracted to ugly hats.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is,
I don't know, we'll have to ask.
but I'm going to start making some.
That's all right, Sammy makes them all the time.
Yeah.
She's a half lady.
Yeah. So, well, shall we?
Sounds like I'm listening.
Since we can't solve any of
I
this.
thought that with Pentecost, we're supposed to be talking in tongues and bowing down on the floor. That's how I always picture it.
Well, if Jim Lukey were here, he does a really good Robert
That's what
Tilton
they do at some
impression.
of the churches. They
Yeah?
really are moved by the Spirit. I've seen it.
Yeah, on the clock. Like 13 minutes into the service every week, somebody comes running down the aisle.
I was going to question those Pentecostal churches when they speak in tongues. Why was it their church that only speaks in tongues and nobody else?
Yeah.
Are they the only ones that are?
Because if you want to be accepted in a Pentecostal church, you will speak in tongues.
Yeah, and I faked it and they accepted it.
Yeah.
They even interpreted it while I was up there.
Mhm.
Because I was sick of, I was in a Pentecostal church, huge congregation.
And you do your thing.
I knew it.
Did you say anything that was like actual tongues, or was it just,
No, I just babbled.
random babbling?
You
I was
babbled?
listening to the other people babble and I just babbled the same
That's
way.
really all it really sounds like is just yeah.
Because I was tired, you had to go up to the altar every single Sunday until
For
you finally
real?
spoke in tongues.
Really?
Yep. Then you were accepted. Then you,
This is a
Part of the
Pentecostal
plan.
church?
So of course you're going to speak in tongues. Now maybe it's conscious, your decision, maybe it's subconscious, but
You don't wanna-
it's
yeah.
peer pressure ultimately.
Yeah, peer pressure,
but
yeah.
also in that situation and in that church, I bit half my tongue off, so I sound like I'm listening or drunk. I would prefer to get drunk right now. But anyway, I got work today. There was, 3-hour services.
Oh my God.
And people were dancing in the
Yeah.
spirit, and falling
Yeah.
down in the spirit, and shit, all over the place.
Yeah.
And at a certain time, yep, there's that lady in the front row doing that dance.
Yeah.
You move by the spirit at the
Yeah.
exact
Mhm.
same time every
Yeah.
fucking Sunday. And, oh, there's this one, now she's gonna be doing this down the aisle. Yep, same dance, same
Those are
place,
entertaining.
every Sunday at 12:15. It's just,
But I thought there was no time in heaven. I thought God didn't wear a watch. So how does God know when to send the Spirit to inspire them in such a punctual manner?
however, I also consider that, you know, like in the whirling dervishes, you get yourself a cafe.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Be very quiet.
You get to such a frenzied state that you do kind of
Yeah, I know what you're
escape
saying.
yourself, and you
Yeah.
do get caught up in the energies around
Oh,
you
yeah.
and what they're expressing and what they're, you know,
Sure.
that y'all get caught up in that.
I'm gonna have to
It's kinda
go
like
just to
going
see
to a
what it's
rave.
like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You start seeing people dancing around, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna start doing this too. Woohoo.
Well, and there's
Everybody just feels this unusual
There's a,
energy.
there's a very definite psychology. An earlier incarnation of this church, we used like 3 or 4 songs opening up when you were in Waukesha, and I would choose the songs to build emotion the way I wanted it built. So was I, depending on the topic and what I was going to preach, was I going to build them to be energized? Was I going to build them to be quiet and mellow? Was I going to try and tug at their heartstrings and set them up for the message? And it's very effective. Obviously, we don't do that here. But I, you know, unless I want to make you cry, then I know which 2
Yeah.
songs to use.
But that's how it always is you set it up in a way that you know is going to manipulate people into thinking what you want them to think.
Right.
Because you put it in their face, you put it in their head, you keep doing it,
Sure.
you know, and you say
Brainwashing.
the certain things, you play the songs, and that person starts thinking, I like that.
I'm
yeah.
gonna go out on my usual limb on this, and I'm gonna take a similar stance to Debbie. There are abuses, and I believe there are people who genuinely experience the spirituality
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
of
Oh,
God's
definitely.
presence
Sure.
and genuinely manifest some of those gifts and are genuinely experiencing them because they are genuinely open to them. Can they be abused? Yes. Should everyone be ridiculed? No.
Right.
Nor
And I-
should
I
anybody
certainly
be
don't-
ridiculed for not manifest.
Correct.
But and when you think about, we can say that those are manipulative choices, but when your favorite band develops their set list, they're doing the same thing.
Yep.
You know.
It's all the time.
I wouldn't take that as manipulative as much as, manipulative, I guess, has negative connotations for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
But,
yeah.
I had another word a second ago, it made a lot more sense. Setting the
mood.
Setting the mood.
Yeah. Well, because
I
what
don't
you're
find that manipulative, I find that if you're having a gathering and you're gonna be sharing certain things, and the topic is a certain thing,
yeah.
then you need to pick music that makes sense for that.
I'm trying to get you open and receptive to
Yeah.
what I in that context to what I have to say.
Yeah.
So that's why,
And that's
when I
okay.
heard manipulation, that,
Yeah, I know it
I
has.
wouldn't use that word, but I'm not the English major, so.
Actually, you know, you think about it like in dating, you have manipulate. It's what
Right.
little things you get, little digits and like stuff.
Right.
But it's you have to manipulate them to get them to work how they're supposed to.
Exactly.
So it's like a different kind, a totally different connotation there too.
Right.
Like, you know, yeah, when you hear that somebody is manipulative, it's a negative.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, 'cause
there's so many different.
in other
It could just be
traditions,
persuasive.
incense and
Well,
Yeah.
persuasive.
Well, that's
you know,
where we have to
smells
open
and
our
bells.
mind to every, you know, even if we were taught something different, that we all have a different journey, and that's okay.
Yeah. But if somebody's asking you to do something that doesn't feel authentic
Right.
to you, don't do it.
Right.
If it does, do it.
Yeah.
Assuming it's not,
I
you
mean,
know,
I wish I
kill
could be
somebody.
moved like that. I think, you know, it looks like it's freeing. But I don't know, I was raised Catholic.
After I'll have to,
Totally, you'll do the same thing.
I'll tell you afterwards about